Okay, let's unpack this incredible moment in human history. We are diving into ancient Mesopotamia, right as it became clear that simple memory just wasn't going to cut it anymore.
Not at all. Cities were growing so rapidly. You had trade routes stretching for hundreds of miles, and these enormous temples were essentially functioning as well as banks and industrial centers.
Right? Managing huge amounts of stuff, mountains of grain, endless jars of oil.
Exactly. We're talking thousands of workers that need to be paid, inventories that need to be tracked.
And here's the core problem, right? How do you run a society that complex without accurate records? I mean, how do you make sure that shipment of copper actually arrives?
You can't. If you can't record it, you can't manage it, and civilization basically stalls out.
So that's what we're exploring, the first ever writing system, cuneiform.
And what's so remarkable is that it didn't start with poetry or, grand stories. It started as pure fundamental accounting. That ability to track resources became the engine of civilization.
And the story doesn't begin with ink and paper or even flat tablets. It starts with something you can actually hold in your hand.
Yeah, these small, simple clay shapes called tokens.
Tokens, so what were they?
They were the original data points. If you were managing the temple sheep, you might use, say, one cone-shaped token for one sheep. A different shape might mean a jar of oil.
So they were physical representations of goods.
Yeah.
Everyone just understood what each shape meant.
Exactly. It was the world's first inventory system. But as trade gets more complex, you run into a huge security problem.
How do you keep it honest?
Precisely. If a merchant gives you 20 tokens for the grain they owe you, how do you stop them from claiming they actually gave you 25? The tokens needed protection.
And the solution they came up with was, I mean, it was just ingenious.
It really was. They started sealing these tokens inside hollow clay balls. Think of them like oversized baseballs made of thick clay. They're called boulets.
So like a clay envelope.
Exactly like a clay envelope. Once the tokens were inside, the outside was stamped with the official seals of both the buyer and the seller.
So the deal was literally sealed. No tampering possible.
Right. But this created a new problem, a practical one.
You can't see what's inside. If you want to check the inventory a year later, you have to smash the whole thing open.
Which is incredibly inefficient. And this is where we see the massive leap forward, the real pivot point toward writing.
What did they do?
To solve that problem, people started pressing the shapes of the tokens onto the outside of the wet clay ball before they sealed it.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. If you see the impression of 5 sheep tokens on the outside, you know what's inside without destroying the record.
And then came the breakthrough realization. It just clicked.
If all the marks are clearly visible on the surface, showing exactly what's owed,
Why bother putting the heavy physical tokens inside at all? They're redundant.
so they just ditched the hollow balls and started pressing the same shapes directly onto flat pieces of clay.
And that shift from physical objects to marks representing those objects, that's the moment writing is born. It just made everything so much more efficient.
And that new system needed a special tool.
It did. And the tool basically dictated the shape of the written language for the next 3,000 years. We're talking about the earliest version of a pen, the stylus.
What was it made of? Not wood.
Mostly river reeds, Mesopotamia had an endless supply of them. A scribe would sharpen one end and, this is the crucial part, cut the tip into a triangular or wedge shape.
So not a pointed tip like we'd think of.
No, a wedge. And the writing material was just moist clay. Abundant and, well, free.
And it had a great feature, an undo button.
A completely self-correcting medium. If you made a mistake, you didn't have to start over. You just smoothed the wet clay and rewrote the line.
And when the record was final, maybe a contract or something important.
It was either left to dry in the sun, which made it pretty durable, or for the really critical records, it was baked in a kiln.
Which turned it into ceramic.
And that's why we have so much information today. Those baked tablets became nearly permanent, surviving thousands of years underground, just waiting for us to find them.
So that action, pressing a wedge into clay, that's the key to the whole cuneiform system. At first, the marks they made were what we call pictographs.
Right, simple drawings that looked like the thing they represented. A wavy line meant water. A little drawing of a grain stalk meant barley. The meaning was obvious.
But drawing detailed pictures takes time.
A lot of time. And scribes were all about efficiency. So over centuries, they started simplifying and abstracting those drawings.
And this is the major physical change, right?
Yeah.
Scribes realized that drawing a smooth, curved line in soft clay is actually pretty awkward and slow.
But pressing a straight edge down, that's fast and clean. So they switched almost entirely to making these straight, clean, wedge-shaped marks.
That simple mechanical insight pressing is faster than drawing, is what changed the look of writing forever.
And on top of that, the script itself rotated. They started out writing vertically, top to bottom.
But it's easier to write left to right when you're holding a tablet.
Exactly. So they turned the whole thing 90 degrees. At that point, the symbol didn't look anything like the original picture. It was a specialized, abstract script you had to learn.
Which brings us to the biggest intellectual leap in this whole story. It's one thing to have a symbol for one ox, but how do you write down complicated ideas?
Or abstract verbs, or someone's name. You can't draw a picture of truth or to desire.
Right, how do you draw a name like Mr. Fast Runner? You just can't.
And this is where the Sumerians shifted from symbols representing objects to symbols representing sounds. It's a revolutionary concept called the rebus principle.
Let's break that down, because it's the foundation for all writing that follows. A rebus is like a puzzle, you know.
It is. The rebus principle means using a picture of one thing to represent the sound of a totally different word.
Like, a modern example would be drawing a picture of an I to stand for the sound of the word I.
Perfect example. The image has nothing to do with the meaning, just the sound. The Sumerians started doing this with their wedge marks. The cuneiform symbol for read, for instance, sounded the same as their word for the verb to be.
So they just repurposed the read symbol to mean to be whenever they needed to write that verb.
Exactly. And the impact of this phonetic shift was transformative. It meant they could suddenly write down abstract ideas, grammar, and critically proper names.
They didn't need thousands of unique pictures anymore. They could use a smaller set of phonetic signs.
And that's what turned cuneiform from a simple accounting tool into a flexible, full writing system. It could record complex language exactly as it was spoken.
So now they could write poems, history, personal letters.
Anything. But mastering the system was incredibly difficult. It took years of dedicated training, starting very young.
In a school called the Aduba.
Which literally means the tablet house. Students started around age 7 or 8, and the curriculum was intense.
They had to memorize hundreds of signs, right?
Yeah.
And the signs could mean different things.
Yeah. Yes, some signs stood for a whole word, others for just a syllable. It was like learning vocabulary and phonics all at once. We have their practice tablets, and the teachers were extremely strict.
Beaten for bad handwriting, I've read.
For bad handwriting, for being late, for talking. They spent their days just copying endless lists of animals, plants, minerals, cities, over and over.
And because that training took so long and was so expensive, most students came from the wealthiest families.
So, absolutely, it was an investment only the elite could afford. But it paid off. Once they graduated, scribes held critical, high-status jobs in the government, the army, the temples.
They were the knowledge gatekeepers. Civilization literally couldn't function without them.
And they put that power to work everywhere. Take law and order. Before writing, a king's rules were just spoken words, hard to enforce consistently.
But writing changes that. It lets kings create detailed standard sets of laws. The famous one is Hammurabi's Code, carved on giant stone pillars for everyone to see.
And having those laws written down meant that judges had a consistent standard to follow. It made justice fairer and more uniform across the whole empire.
And what about just running the government? Day-to-day stuff.
They used cuneiform constantly for conducting a census to see who owed military service, for collecting taxes efficiently.
An official could send a written order hundreds of miles away, and the governor there would know exactly what the king wanted.
Exactly. It solidified control. But if you look at the thousands of tablets we've found, most of them aren't about royal decrees.
They're about money.
They're about money, trade, and the economy. Merchants use them for everything. Contracts, receipts, shipping manifests. It was the backbone of long-distance trade.
You could have legal proof of an agreement with someone 500 miles away.
Tablets tracked weights of silver and gold before coins existed. They tracked interest on loans, wages paid to laborers. It was the world's first extensive financial system.
And beyond money, their use in science and math is just phenomenal. It still affects us today.
It really does. Scholars recorded meticulous observations of stars and planets. They were incredible mathematicians.
They developed a system based on the number 60, not 10 like we use.
And that system is why you divide an hour into 60 minutes and a minute into 60 seconds.
And why a circle has 360 degrees. That's a direct legacy from Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago.
They also used it for massive engineering projects like building ziggurats and for complex medical records, logging symptoms and treatments.
And finally, there's culture, literature. Cuneiform is why we have some of the oldest stories ever told.
The Epic of Gilgamesh. Without writing, that and so many other cultural treasures, proverbs, riddles, songs, they would have been completely lost.
Cuneiform was just so successful, it became the premier writing system of its time, the international language of power.
It really did. It spread across the Near East. Empires like the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, they all adopted it and adapted it for their own languages.
It was even used for diplomacy between kingdoms for over 3,000 years.
An unbelievable run. But, history moves on. New technology always arrives.
And while cuneiform was flexible, you still had to memorize hundreds of signs.
Which was hard. And then newer writing systems came along, like the Phoenician alphabet, which used far, far fewer symbols, maybe just 20 or 30.
Which made them so much easier for regular people to learn. They were more efficient.
And they eventually replaced the older system. By the time of the Roman Empire, cuneiform was pretty much just used by a handful of priests and scholars in temples.
The last known tablet was written around the 1st century AD. And then
Yeah.
it was just gone. The script died.
For almost 2,000 years, no one on Earth could read it. All those voices, all that history was trapped in the clay.
Until modern scholars in the 19th century finally cracked the code and we could hear those ancient voices again. It just completely rewrote our understanding of human history.
It's an incredible story. Cuneiform evolved from simple clay tokens for counting sheep into a complex system that preserved laws, science, and literature.
Its invention was the turning point that allowed small societies to grow into massive, structured empires, laying the foundation for, well, for everything that came after.
Good luck with your studies.
See you next time.